Hello, this is Tish here doing my daily Bible study. Today is Tuesday, February 17th. We will be reading out of Joshua, which is in the Old Testament, chapter 23, verses 14. And this Joshua is the Joshua, if you've ever heard that song, Joshua fought the battle at Jericho. That was a song I learned in Sunday school. Joshua fought the battle at Jericho, Jericho, Jericho. But anyway, so this is the Joshua. This is the Joshua who, if you've watched the Ten Commandments, the original one with Charlton Heston as Moses, the Joshua that comes and follows, not follows him, but finds him in the desert and then brings him back. This is this Joshua. So the King James Version reads, and I'm sorry, I just had to put that in there because it kind of helps. Like for the longest, I was reading the Bible thinking, like when they say Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the Jacob that they talk about is the father of Joseph. And Joseph is the one who could interpret dreams, and there's a Broadway play about him, and the Joseph and the color coat or something like that. But I didn't know that the Jacob from when people say the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob was the Jacob that was the father of Joseph. And it just hit me one day, is that the same Jacob? So it's kind of good for me to be able to put all, to help it tie all together, because sometimes when you study the Bible, like you just study certain parts, certain books, you forget how they link all together. So anyway, so the King James Version reads as follows: And behold, this day I'm going the way of all the earth, and ye know in all your hearts and in all your souls that not one thing hath failed of all the good things which the Lord your God spake concerning you. All are come to pass unto you, and not one thing hath failed thereof. And the NIV reads, Now I am about to go the way of all the earth. You know with all your heart and soul that not one of all the good promises the Lord your God gave you has failed. Every promise has been fulfilled. Not one has failed. Okay, so he's telling the people that he's about to die. I don't know if you know, but for 40 years, okay, once the people were freed from Egypt, freed from slavery, they wandered in the desert for 40 years. And it wasn't, they didn't have to. They weren't following, they weren't changing, they weren't, when things got tough, they wanted to go back to Egypt, back to slavery. They didn't have to do anything. The Bible says that God made this like bread come down. So if you ever hear manna from heaven, there was bread or something that we just call it bread. There was something that came down, so when they got up in the morning, all they had to do was go outside of their tent, gather enough of this manna for all in their family, and eat it, cook it, whatever they did with it. And then at night, they got something else. But their food was taken care of. Their clothes lasted 40 years. Their shoes lasted 40 years. Whatever they asked for. One day they wanted meat, so God sent them a ton of birds. I forget what kind of birds. So they could kill the birds and eat the birds. Whatever they needed, God gave to them, but they still argued. They still were shady with each other. They still, they just weren't. And so what God did in those 40 years was let the old people die off, and brought, the new generation, made them ready to go to the new land, which Moses didn't even go. Moses did all that, got the people out, walked with them, tried to teach them, and Moses didn't get to go to the new promised land. Joshua went. So then when Moses died, Joshua was like the new leader. And so he's telling them, okay, I'm going to die now. But know this, know in your heart and your soul, not one promise was broken. Never did God fail you. Every promise was been fulfilled. And of all the things he could have said, he could have told them, remember the commandments, look for the Messiah. He could have told them all these things. The last thing the point he wanted to convey to them was, remember that God keeps his promises. And that is just something that it's good to know. Especially in a time like this when so many people are devastated. It's just good to know that if you're a godly person and you trust in God and you live as godly as you can, he fulfills his promises. And, listening to the radio, I heard this man, him and his wife, they're preachers, but he was laid off and he hasn't been, he's been looking for a job. It's been like 6 months, but they've been able to always have food. They've been able to have gas in their cars, so God provides. And, maybe it's not the lavish lifestyle of some people, but this man, so because he hasn't had to work, he's been able to focus on his ministry more, and his church is growing. So eventually he'll get enough people in the church, and he probably won't even have to go back to work. But it's just, living by faith is hard, it's difficult. But really living without faith, I think, is even more difficult. But anyway, so that's my Bible study for the day. It was a short one. I don't really have anything else to add to that, except that I truly believe that. And you have to know, you have to read the Bible to know what's been promised to you. To know, like I always say, you can't just give your life to Christ one day and then the next day expect to have everything, all of the promises. Some of the promises, if you don't even know the promises, how can you expect to have them? If you don't know the promise for good health, you don't know, then you can't expect to have it. If you don't know about healing, then you can't expect to be healed when you're sick. So anyway, alright, again, I do a daily Bible study anyway, and I had an idea to make a podcast to share it with others. Maybe you're too busy to do your own Bible study, or maybe you just won't do it, but you are welcome to listen in on mine. And as always, bless and be blessed, and tune in tomorrow.